Among the Jungle podcast, where we're expanding our perception of the plant kingdom. Welcome. I'm botanist and host Shai Kaina, and I would love for you to join me as I interview incredible plant people around the world to create an audio vault of inspiring botanical knowledge, all while harnessing a deeper connection between us and our natural world. If you're ready, it's time to inspire your wild. Welcome back, Jungle Dwellers, to episode number 20 of Among the Jungle podcast. Today we journey from New York City to LA with Nick Cutsumpas, also known as Farmer Nick, to discover how the plant path has led him down a path of sustainability, or maybe vice versa, and how plants inspire us to live a plant-based life in all aspects. From the big flower fight on Netflix to the co-creation of Essential Farmers, Nick inspires us to appreciate plants as an extension of nature, instead of viewing them as home decor or furniture. Nick and I have a lot in common, but our combined passions for plants and sustainability is very obvious in this episode. We unpack a lot in this conversation, and I'm so excited to share it. Today we will learn why plants and sustainability go hand in hand, tips for bringing more sustainable practices into your home and garden, and how to cultivate curiosity, patience, and joy in your life. Show notes for this episode can be found at amongthejungle.com/020. Get ready to see houseplants as your new sustainability gurus as we welcome Nick to the jungle.
Yeah, no, I'm super pumped, and I can't wait to dive into it. It's funny, in the houseplant world, it doesn't always correlate with the environmental values and sustainability. So this is important to me.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing as the community grows and grows that there are a lot of things still within the community that can be addressed and improved to make, the plant industry itself a more ecological industry in and of itself.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So I would love to first kind of chat about, we all know, I'm sure that you just had a big move from New York to California. And of course, I'm just curious how that went, but also what you learned about having a great collection of plants during that experience.
Yeah, it's I'll say that the move is still in progress. I am, slowly putting together, kind of an eco-friendly home in a way, right? And I think, when you rush into those decisions, you end up, buying furniture that might not be the most sustainable and buying different knickknacks and trinkets that look great immediately, but maybe are not the best for the environment. So I'm taking it very slow. I don't even have a bed yet, but the mattress is here from Avocado Mattress, which is exciting.
I love them.
They're amazing. They're so cool. So yeah, the move is good. And, now it's tough because I am slowly rebuilding my plant collection. You go from 90-ish plus plants back home in New York to 0, and you have a lot of catching up to do. I ended up selling the majority of my plants back home for charity. And I still got about 10% of them that I just couldn't bear to see leave. So my mom is taking good care of them back home in Westchester.
Awesome. I wondered if you kept any from your collection. What were some of your favorites that you kept?
It wasn't even anything that was crazy rare or unique. It was more so ones that had a lot of sentimental value. The first 5 plants in my collection, my Monstera that I adopted, which is now like 6 feet tall. My fiddle leaf fig, which literally when I got it was a foot, now it's like 8 feet, right? Like those things that you grow with are really very impactful for me. And then obviously there's a couple in there that are more unique, like a Liquala grandis, which is just a beautiful palm that, for some reason really likes my home environment. Palms can be very tricky indoors, especially in New York when it gets dry in those winters. So there's definitely a few that are back home, but I gave my mom very good care instructions, so she's doing a good job.
That's awesome. That cracks me up because when I made my big move from South Florida to Alaska, I did the same thing. I sold most of my collection, but there were a couple key plants that I just couldn't get rid of. And my mom is taking care of them. In Tennessee, I dropped them off, part of the way through. I left her a Thai constellation, which is
Oh,
so big
wow.
now. She actually built I bought a huge one because in South Florida, they were so much more reasonable.
Oh,
They're more
yeah.
reasonable there than anywhere else. So I got a huge mature one for $300. And I mean, she was a beast. And now my mom had to build a whole sunroom and she takes up like a whole quarter of it. She's just got leaves and things going out every direction. She's so happy. But my mom is like, I'm looking forward to the day that you come and take this plant back.
You're going to have to fly in just to repot.
Exactly. Yes, I have to come. It takes like 3 of us. They've had to build a whole lighting system in that corner for her to help like move her leaves in the right direction. It's so hilarious. I also gave her this small little, it wasn't anything like crazy, but I had this sacred fig that I just absolutely loved. And it's like sometimes there's just those few special ones in your collection that are hard to give up. But what I found interesting is the same thing you're going through with your move, is that it seems like moving is a perfect time to really start being mindful about what you have in your space and what you bring back in and being sustainably minded about it. So we made a lot of big changes when we moved, and it seems like a good time to do that.
Yeah, it's something that I've never really had the opportunity to do myself because, you're living with, a bunch of people, you have other, roommates who have different ideas on things. And yes, I still have some roommates now, but my space itself, my room is probably the largest room I've had since childhood. And now I have a different kind of lens of how I want to kind of bring that to life. And one thing that I really am adamant about is understanding that, you can live a plant-based life that's more than just your diet. And I think that's reflective in your furniture, your clothing, what you do at the farmer's market, right? Like there's so much about it that ties into building a plant-based space. And, I know I mentioned avocado mattress before, but like, there's another company, Medley, which has FCS certified lumber, which I had no idea, right? That sustainably sourced and forested lumber was even a thing. I just would go to IKEA and get the cheapest thing that looked nice, put it there. And then when I moved, I said, I'll just throw it out on the street. Someone will get it. But there's so much waste associated with that industry, especially in urban cities where people move so frequently. So it's really taught me to kind of slow down a little bit and be very intentional and purposeful with everything I'm putting inside my space that aren't just plants.
Yes. And like we talked about this actually in a recent previous episode with Deserto. They're a company down in Mexico who makes, they're making materials out of cactus and things like that. So they make vegan cactus leather, and you should totally check out that episode because they are the coolest. It was all about sustainability. These people these 2 guys have went above and beyond to create an actual like business that is like sustainable in every way that you can think about. And what was so interesting is one of them was previously in the furniture industry. And one thing that I hadn't even thought about that he brought up was also there's a lot of chemical off-gassing with furniture that happens for, up to like 9 years after you buy a new piece of furniture. When we refocus and buy things that are plant-based, like you're saying, we find that there are not as many toxins, which was a huge change that we made in our house. We went toxin free. And when we went toxin free, it made me realize that pretty much everything that doesn't contain toxins is made from plants. So, not that plants can't contain toxins, because they can, but just that most of the products, if you're going to buy an alternate product, it's plant-based. So living as close as you can to a plant-based lifestyle really can incorporate just about everything in your life, down to your toothpaste and your toothbrush.
Everything, right? And I think the coolest thing about my own plant journey is that I never thought about these things before I had plants. It's only when I
Yes.
started having plants that was kind of the stepping stone I needed to say, like, how can I reevaluate every little aspect of my life and make, whether that's being zero waste or buying things secondhand or looking for more plant-based products. You'd find this interesting, given your conversation with the cactus leather guys. It's just that there's a company in New York, in Brooklyn, that is growing mycelium lampshades, like literally
Wait,
growing
what?
these. Literally, you check it out. I think it's like Shun lighting or something like that.
Wow.
But they have these beautiful lamps and lighting fixtures, and it's got like this white kind of casing around it, much like any other kind of light fixture would have. And it's made out of mycelium. They literally grow their products.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to have to link them in the show notes because that sounds incredible. We're definitely going to have to check that out. Wow, that's so interesting. So how you said that plants have been a stepping stone to sustainability for you. The same is true for me. Having a garden with my family. And then once I graduated and I moved out, I started getting really interested in plants. We went to Hawaii to the National Tropical Botanical Garden, and I realized that plants are my ultimate happy space. And then when I started bringing them into my home, then I started realizing that there's plants at other people's houses or in the background of movies I'm watching. And it made me more and more aware, to the point that I started caring more about plants, which then, leads out to caring more about nature. So how do you like to teach, because I know that's kind of your mission, teach those stepping stones to other people?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to the teaching aspect is recognizing that this is a living thing, right? It's not a piece of furniture. It's not an inanimate object that you can just set it and forget it, unless it's like a snake plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I think that a lot of it is setting expectations,
Yes.
because there are so many folks, especially in urban cities, especially those who are living these fast-paced lives where everything is instant, where you have to say, hey, listen, I'm going to plant this and it's going to look like this today, but you have to envision what this is going to look like in a year from now or even 2 years from now. And that's hard
Mm-hmm.
for people, right? They
It
they don't
is,
want
yeah.
they don't want to wait. They want the instant. And I think that more than anything else, plants teach you patience. And
Mm-hmm.
setting that expectation early is so important to me. And honestly, I don't like working with people who just say, hey, do this, do that, make it look good, and tell me what I owe you, because they're not in it for the right reasons. And
Mm-hmm.
they might pay the bills, right? But it's not enjoyable for me, and it's not going to be as enjoyable for them. So for me, it's about having them understand sort of their role in the home ecosystem, and seeing that, hey, you are an active player in this ecosystem and you have to do certain things to make sure that everything is functioning properly, be it plant check-ins or, fertilizing plants, because most people forget about that. And just trying to make them not sort of humanize the plants, because I know there's a lot of scientists who very much discourage anthropomorphizing, but building a relationship with those plants.
Yeah, totally. I talk about the home ecosystem. This is something that I've been talking about in several of my solo episodes recently, because I think it's so important for people to understand that this is a whole environment and all the things in that environment affect each other. So how do you kind of explain that home ecosystem concept to people?
It doesn't always come up in conversation, right? I try and push it forward, and some people are like, yeah, whatever, crazy hippie plant guy, whatever, leave me alone. But I think introducing it is really when they start talking about, like, give me a watering schedule, tell me exactly when I need to do this, and it doesn't work like that. And I think it's irresponsible of me and anyone who's giving advice on plants to say, you need to do it on Sundays at 3 p.m. every single week for the rest of your life, because that's not what an ecosystem is, especially when you're in a climate and an area that has seasons where lighting is changing, temperature is changing, your heat is turning on. Like, there's so many factors there. So when they ask me for that, that's usually when I start talking about, you need to check in. And if this plant is getting more sun than is expected and you have to water it every, couple days as opposed to once a week, do it, right? Don't look at what you find on Google and say, oh, but it said to do this. Google doesn't know your plant. The person giving that advice doesn't know your conditions. So it's on you to be an observer. And once you kind of check in and observe and see what happens from season to season, month to month, you will be so much more informed as to how you can really treat your plants the way they need to be treated.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even noticed just over the course of the last month, it's a little bit more rainy in Alaska. So we just got out of our very, very long day season where we have 20 plus hour days, and they're all bright sunshine and they're just beaming in my windows from every direction, and the sun stays up high in the sky. So it's like noon sun all day. So it's just very hot, very bright, very intense. And for the last month or so, we've had these rainier days, which means that they're getting drastically different lighting, which means the watering took a absolute curve over it's still the summer, it's still a summer month, but because we're having rainier, cloudier days, the watering schedule totally has to change in comparison to the really, really sunny month. So even just the weather outside can affect the things that you need to be doing inside to take care of your plants.
1,000%. And I could not imagine the fluctuations that you go through in Alaska. Like, I thought New York is bad, right? You get 4 seasons, but that's intense. That's a huge change. And now I'm in a climate where like everything's pretty much the same all year round, which is great, but it takes a lot for you to make some of those adjustments. So I'm impressed.
Yeah, like I said, when I lived down in South Florida, I had over 500 plants because it was easy to maintain. I had hundreds inside, and then I had a whole outdoor patio that just had hundreds of plants because they basically maintain themselves. They're like absorbing moisture from the air and everything else. But now that I'm up here, I'm in a drier climate. It's a totally different thing. Now I have to constantly take the weather into consideration. I bought a water meter because now I need to check in with my plants a lot more often. I can't just assume, oh, they all need water today. They each need to be individually checked. And in the winter, I actually have to add supplemental lighting, which I never thought was going to happen, There's all kinds of changes that I've had to make, and I've had to realize that to have that really healthy life balance, I can't have 500 plants here. We have about 130, and that's the maximum about that we can have to maintain during the harsher months.
I love that approach, though. And this is something I talk about on my platforms as well, is that everyone's got a number. And it's not about the quantity of plants you have, but it's the quality of care that you provide. And depending on your situation, if you're moving, if you have a kid, if you end up adopting a dog, like all those factors will influence your number up or down. So I think there's so much to be said about being very cognizant of that and not have this be some kind of, plant pissing contest where it's like, well, you have 500, I have 600. Like, that's not what it's about. And if you have one plant on your desk and you love that plant and take care of that plant to the best of your ability, that is fantastic. I would much prefer that.
Yes. And I feel the same about the pissing contest as far as having these really exotic and rare plants as well.
Oh my gosh, it drives me crazy.
It drives me so crazy, mostly because people don't realize that many of these exotic plants haven't been growing indoors for very long, just a couple years. We yanked them from the wild and we're like, oh, now we must keep you in a little tiny vase and preserve you for as long as we can. But we have all these plants that have been inside for decades. When I lived in Florida, it was a lot easier to have all these exotic plants and all this stuff. But every exotic plant I have purchased has been the most stressful plant of my entire collection every time. Last winter, I bought a variegated banana from Hawaii. It got damaged in the mail. It was definitely the most exotic plant I had in my collection here. And I wasn't going for having a bunch of exotics. It was just a plant that I'm in love with. I really wanted. It stressed me out all winter long until it died in the spring. And I was just like, Why? Oh my gosh, why? But then I spent $100 on that plant that just stressed me out till it died. And then I spent $20 on a plant that has grown up my wall and makes my whole house look like a jungle. The plants that I
Yeah.
bought for cheaper that have been bigger, that have been common, quote unquote, household plants, always do the best inside and they thrive. And when people walk in, you actually get that jungle vibe because everything is thriving instead of just like holding on for dear life.
Yeah, that resonates so much with me because you see these like plant trade shows and plant cutting selling for literally thousands of dollars. And that's cool. If you've got the money and you want to, have that variegated Monstera Adansoni, go for it. Not for me. And
Right.
I think for the average person, because my mission is not plants, right? I'm a environmentalist disguised as a plant guy.
Yep.
And if I'm going to get someone into plants for the first time, knowing that that's going to lead them down the path to other more, sustainable behaviors, why would I give them something that's going to give them stress? Why would I give them something or recommend something that will create anxiety and fear? And when they fail, they say, you know what, I'm done with this whole plant thing altogether.
Yep.
So there's no shame in starting small and having the common plants. Like I still buy the common plants that I think look great. Like a wall of snake plants looks awesome in a space. I think a Monstera that's climbing up and doing, as you described, really creates a different vibe. And if I can get my space to look good, save money, and also just have a space that I'm confident in caring for, then I've achieved it. I don't need the crazy plants to feel like I am a plant expert or anything like that.
That is so powerful. It doesn't make you any more of a plant guru. It's really just like you're saying, how well are you caring for the plants in your space? And because that is how your space is going to feel. That's what matters the most. When I was studying plants, back in college, I took care of interior plants, what we now are calling houseplants. It was so interesting because it's that concept of make this space look a little better. Just put something green in this corner, put something green over here, far away from windows, but that's the space that they want it to fit into. They're trying to make plants fit into the space as decor instead of what does this plant need and how could I put this plant in my space where we both thrive the most, where it's going to thrive the most. And then inadvertently, I'm going to thrive the most because my plant is going to be thriving. If you bring a plant home and you don't look to meet any of its needs, it's going to start shriveling or getting sad. And then you're going to be getting sad and stressed, worrying about what happened to it or what's happening to it. And it creates a whole negative energy where when you kind of think about that plant as a living thing, not an ornament for your desk, not something to fill this empty space in this dark corner, but something that's living and that has needs, light being one of the most important ones. It really helps you build a thriving ecosystem.
Yeah, it totally does. And, I think there's many factors that people, consider when looking at plants. Obviously, light, I think, is the most important, should always be most important. But I oftentimes tell people that you can't be a helicopter plant parent. Like, you have to be a little hands off sometimes and let the plant go through some struggles. Bringing home plants from nurseries and then planting them at home, and then you get a call the next day, oh my God, I lost a leaf. I'm like,
Yes.
Well, yeah, like if you were a plant and you grew up in paradise your whole life in these greenhouses, and then you went to live in this box that has half the light, no humidity, this and that, you'd probably lose leaves too.
They gotta lose a leaf for all the plant friends they left behind.
Pour one out, lose a leaf for the homies they left behind, right? But you're absolutely right. It's frustrating for me when people don't recognize that. And, I oftentimes will say, listen, instead of doing a million things all at once, something goes wrong. Oh my God, I got to fertilize. I got to water more. I got to water less. I got to change the location, whatever. That's not following of the scientific process.
This is the key right here.
You need to make one change at a time, because how else are you going to know which thing made the impact? It's just, it's common sense at a certain point, right? So just be patient. Be patient.
Every time I get duetted, I constantly get duets on TikTok where people are tagging me or asking me for, advice about all their plants. And the number one thing, they'll leave a whole comment that's like, here are the 50,000 things that I changed. And I'm like, when you change 50,000 things at once, you have no idea what's helping or what's doing more damage.
It
You got to just
drives me
take it
crazy.
slow and do one thing at a time until you figure it out.
I got to follow you on TikTok. I didn't know you were on the top. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I'm on there as Among the Jungle. I love TikTok. It's
Oh,
so fun.
yeah.
So I'd love to talk about how you got into this whole plant path and how that came about for you.
The plants kind of came out of nowhere. I was living very much a not plant-based life in college. I was a baseball player. I was very into like protein and eating meat and not caring as much about the environment. I always liked nature, but I was not focused on anything related to ecology or environmental values that I have now. But I graduated, was ready to live my corporate life in New York City. I was living at home in Westchester, going to commute down to the city. My job at IBM didn't start for a few months. And my mom said, hey, why don't you do something around the house? And I said, well, what do you want me to do? She goes, you like fitness, you like food. Why don't you go outside and garden? Maybe you can grow some of your own food and we can eat that this summer. Sure, no problem. Threw a couple tomato plants, couple cukes, some zucchini, whatever. And I was just done. It was over. Like once I felt what it was like to get my hands in the dirt, see a seedling mature, and then transitioning to like, okay, I did seedlings this year. Now I'm going to do seeds. And then, this year I got ravaged by the chipmunks. Now I'm going to build a giant veggie fortress. There were so many things that kind of just came up naturally through that. And I learned so much in those 7 years of doing it. And I still do it now. We'll be continuing it in LA. But it wasn't until I had moved into my apartment in New York City about 3 years after graduation where I realized like, wait, like I'm missing something. Like, why am I not feeling good? And it was because I was living in a concrete metal box. And it's tough, right? You go from this nice green suburban neighborhood being outside all the time to this kind of dead, stale environment. And I kind of freaked out and was like, I just need to buy plants. That only makes sense. And, that became 1 plant, 2 plants, 75 plants. And, it was something that felt really natural to me. I don't think you need to necessarily need to read every single book on plants to become, competent. And people started asking questions. I started the Instagram just for fun. And then, lo and behold, I quit my job a year ago now and have been doing this full time ever since, which was a heck of a conversation at the dinner table with my family. But I think they understand now.
Congratulations on all of that. It's amazing how that all formulated. And what I love to tell people all the time is there are so many beautiful success stories in this industry that didn't require any kind of plant degree. While it's helpful to have some knowledge or working knowledge of plants, there's so much out there to attain for free. I mean, I learned a lot going to college, but I felt like the master gardeners taught me so much because they gave you the basic tools and then they're like, let's go get our hands in the dirt. It was getting hands in the dirt. It was having plants, killing plants repeatedly. Killing plants has probably taught me more than anything else. I killed so many peace lilies years ago when I was in college. My husband used to constantly make fun of me for going to college for plants because I could not keep a peace lily alive in our house. And
they're dramatic. They're very dramatic.
I had to learn that, first of all, there's plant parent styles. Not all of us work good with the same plants. Some of us are helicopter parents, and those people should have things like ferns and peace lilies and things that want constant attention. But for me, I like to have a life. I like to travel and go places and do things. And so I need plants that care when I'm here, but also can care for themselves a little when I need to head out. And so it's important to know who you are as a plant parent. And I think that's, a big part of the beginning of your journey is figuring out what plants work for you and what don't. And now that I've honed that, now I have peace lilies all over my house and they're doing great because I know better. I know a little better now.
You speak their language, right? It's a rhythm that you get into. I did a little video for Goop the other day, and it was all about plant love languages. And you got to speak it. You got to know, right? And it's one of those things where until you truly interact with the plant for the first time in person, you don't know a plant. You don't know it until you plant it. And you could read every book, you could do this, you could do that, but until you're working with that plant, you will never truly understand it. And I that's why I tell people, mess up, buy a couple plants, try a couple different things, put one in more light, put one in less light. Don't be afraid to make those adjustments as long as they're one at a time. But it's so vital that they actually start feeling it themselves and seeing the results in person.
Yeah. And I like to tell people that you don't even know about a species. Just because you have a thriving Monstera at home doesn't mean you can go buy another one and that one needs to be treated the exact same way. I love to take people on a tour around my house because I have 8 Monsteras in my house. It's my favorite plant, and I could have nothing but Monsteras and pothos. I love them. And before I would be like, oh, pothos are so lame, because you just see them everywhere, but they're awesome. They just do their thing all the time. In pretty much like any lighting condition, those things are just so hardy and awesome. And they can create such a big impact. And so I'll take people on a tour around my house just to show them how my different Monsteras are growing in different areas. And I even have 2 cuttings that I bought at the exact same time when I moved here. They were the first 2 plants I bought. I got these 2 mature Monstera cuttings, and it was just one leaf, these big mature leaves, one on each little petiole, and it was pushing out new stems. I planted them, and they're on the different sides of my fireplace. So they're like the perfect framing of my fireplace. They each have now 3 leaves, but the leaves look entirely different. One is getting way more light. The other one is getting a little less. And so the one that's getting more light is producing mature leaves with perforations and fenestrations. The one getting less light is not producing as mature of leaves. And you can see the evidence right in front of you that even slightly different conditions create different growing habits in the same exact plant. They all are individuals just like we are people. The number one question I get asked this time of year is, what kind of grow lights do I use? And let me be the first to tell you, all grow lights are not created equally. I've experimented with several kinds for tropical houseplants as well as seed germination for the garden. And after a lot of trial and error, I have finally found a bulb I can confidently recommend. Housebright. That's Haus Bright. A grow light bulb designed specifically for us plant parents. It's portable and screws into any lamp or light fixture. And most importantly, it provides the full spectrums of light required for optimal plant growth. Meaning these bulbs are literally the next best thing to the sun. Unlike the sun, however, they won't overheat or burn your houseplants. And they come in 3 beautiful colors. Original, which is the pink magenta color we see a lot of times in grow bulbs, as well as warm white and pure white. And they're offering a special just for us. Visit housebright.com, HAUSbright.com, and use code ATJ10. As in Among the Jungle, that's ATJ10 for 10% off your first bulb order. Be sure to check the show notes for quick links to this discount and to explore the bulbs for yourself. You're gonna love Housebright, and your plants are gonna love you for providing the lumens they so desperately need this winter. The one getting less light is not producing as mature of leaves. And you can see the evidence right in front of you that even slightly different conditions create different growing habits in the same exact plant. They all are individuals just like we are people.
That it's beautiful right there. I think that, for any parent who understands that they could have two kids who, from a DNA perspective, are as closely related as they could possibly be, even if they're twins, identical twins, you can't treat them the same. They are different people. And, you can go into it with a rough idea and know, like, hey, in general, I know that this works. So I'm open to new ideas and I'm open to being flexible about how I care for this other being in my house. And I think you put it perfectly.
Thank you. So I'm curious how the pandemic has shifted your work at all. Has it changed anything for you?
Yeah, a lot of work is now virtual. Being able to get little FaceTime visits through people's homes and, giving plant advice there. And it's difficult. And honestly, it's more challenging because, you can't really tell unless you're there fully, exactly what's going on. They might not show you things on their camera screen that you might notice and be like, hey, how close is that heater? Or, how high up is that ledge so that your dog or cat can't get there, right?
Yes.
So there's a lot of factors that I kind of go, not that they go unnoticed, but it's hard to get the full picture per se. So a lot of my business has transitioned there. Fortunately, I do landscaping work as well, so being outside is much easier. I had a client the other day here in Venice. I landed in Venice and I get someone reach out saying, "Hey, can you come by and check out my plants?" I'm like, "Sure." So it's happening
Awesome.
quickly, which is cool. But
Everything's aligning.
exactly. But a lot of that was she brought literally her whole plant collection outside, and we toured it. We had our masks on. This is what we're doing now. So that's how it's really changed on the client side. But seeing just from the pure Instagram side, right, which is where a good portion of my business exists. It's about promoting kind of these different workshops that you're doing, teaching classes on different subjects. I do a weekly class with a fashion company in New York called Pilzora, where I'm covering a new topic in the plant world, and would totally love to have you on it on their IG Live at some point. That would be
That'd
super
be
fun. But yeah, it's interesting to see how people are adapting. But the good news is the pandemic has shown others who were never into plants previously, like, oh, I need this. Like, there's a reason seed companies are sold out around the country. There's a reason why you can't buy lumber for raised beds. Like, everything is sold out because people are home and they're caring about it in a whole different way. And I'm pretty confident it's going to stick.
I even heard that there's a pothos shortage and from some of
No
the
way.
local plant shops.
No
and I was like,
way.
wait, what? They're like, we are really struggling to get pothos. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is the world coming to? I don't understand.
That is outrageous.
Oh my
If you need
gosh.
pothos, come to Los Angeles. There's plenty.
I love them. I love them. Well, it's been so great to see that so many people are definitely bringing plants home at this time. What do you think is some advice that you'd like to give to people maybe who have recently brought plants home?
New plant parents, man,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite type. First thing off the bat is you can't be afraid to kill your plants, and not say we're going to do this on purpose, right? But it happens, and I encourage them to just set reasonable expectations and know that, hey, if you bought 10 plants and one of them died, that does not make you a bad person. That sometimes there are factors that are beyond our control. This plant could have been diseased. It could have had different pests that you were not, used to seeing. There could have been a variety of things that have impacted this plant's success, and it's not all on you. That's the
Yes.
first thing off the bat. The second thing, which is just a more, from a care perspective, is that you can't be afraid to make adjustments, right? You can't get plant paralysis and be like, I'm not sure what to do, so I'm going to do nothing. Check in with the plants every day, just in the beginning at least. All it takes is literally 30 seconds for each plant. Walk over, feel the soil, check out the leaves, give them a compliment, and move on. Right? It doesn't require this like hour-long like dissection of the soil and this and that. Like, you can get there if you want, but these little check-ins catch problems early, and dealing with a spider mite infestation a month from now is going to be way
Oh,
harder than if you say, oh, I noticed a little something here. Let me just treat that right away.
mm-hmm.
You got to be proactive because they're
Yes.
not going to bark or cry when something goes wrong. They're just going to silently die.
One day you're going to be like, yesterday that was all green and now today there's 5 yellow leaves. What happened here? And you didn't notice the slow degradation. I say the same thing. I think it's good to just put eyes on every day if you can, very quickly, like you're saying. It just takes a few seconds. Check in. If you notice any drastic changes in your plants, like very quick changes, typically I have found in my personal collection, that means that there is some kind of either serious watering issue or a pest issue. If there's drastic changes right away.
Or sometimes temperature, right? When you turn on that AC and you got an AC blasting a plant or the heaters come on, that can be a big factor too. But I agree with you on those factors.
Yes, that's huge, especially in season changes. And we have another one coming up here, moving into the winter. People are going to be bringing their plants they put outdoors back inside, and they're going to be switching from AC to heat, just like you're saying. And those things do make drastic changes in the health of our plants, for sure. Great things to keep in mind. So I'd love to talk a little bit about Essential Farmers. Tell us about Essential Farmers and how that's continuing to grow with you as you move to LA.
Great question, and I appreciate you asking about it. It's a project that I co-founded with my business partner, Adrian, who is the CEO of a living roof company based out of New York.
Oh, wow.
And it's a perfect combination, right? Because they had access to, this beautiful rooftop space in Staten Island, of all places. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Staten Island, but it's the forgotten borough oftentimes of New York. And it was literally, I think it's 13,000 square feet on the ferry terminal. And this was an area that had previously, been kind of, unused because of the construction nearby. There was so much, in the air and particles, this that they hadn't put any plants on the roof in quite some time, at least edible plants. So we led a team of volunteers in New York with the mission of, giving them hands-on, hands-dirty experience, learning how to grow, and wanting to support not only the food insecure communities during the pandemic, but also the local farmers who were struggling as well. So buying seedlings from them and turning this rooftop into a food-producing oasis. And, we've produced probably close to 500 pounds of food. And it's very much infancy stage, right? Like not all of the roof is in use, maybe only 10% right now, but we've weeded it, we've treated it, we've put down seeds. We're transitioning to a fall crop right now in New York. And we have a group of volunteers, usually about 10 or 12 volunteers every Saturday, who are up there on that roof, putting in the work and the time to make sure that, people in the community are getting access to nutritious food. And it's something that, when we announced this back in April or March, whenever it was, we had over 400 signups from 32 different states. And I was like, oh my God, like how do we help the person in Utah? Like, how do we help the person in Georgia? So we're making it our mission to really find people who either have access to unused spaces or know someone who needs volunteers, and are going to be kind of creating these regional chapters where, if I'm in LA and I find a space, which is my goal in the next month or so, I can get volunteers and I can use the social media presence to say, hey, if you're in LA and you want to learn and you want to benefit your community, come out on Saturday at 11 and we're going to turn this lot into something special. So that's kind of where it originated, and it's grown way more than we ever anticipated. But it's so encouraging to see so many folks who, A, want to get their hands dirty and learn about this skill, and B, do so in a way that's supporting the community and the local farmers involved.
Yeah, because like we talked about, getting your hands dirty is how you learn. It's really how you gain the quickest, fastest, most in-depth experience with plants, is learning the things that are going wrong and just the natural thing, especially when you're growing a garden, because there's so many elements outside of your control. Inside your house, there are still a lot of things that you can control, but outside you get a windstorm and it knocks over all your quinoa
I'm not salty. But it's like you work so hard. And
That's
I think you
hilarious.
had corn fall over, or your corn at one point was falling over, wasn't it? When you guys had some windstorms out there. I don't know. It's like you don't have control over a lot once you start growing outdoors. It's a whole other thing. So you learn a lot.
Yeah, it's seriously, it's tough. I mean, we had the tropical storm the other day, and I lost 3 corn stalks, and I was devastated. Lost a couple tomato plants because my structure got tilted, hit something. Like it was, and you just you say, hey, chalk that one up to Mother Nature. Nothing you can do there. The one I struggle with personally the most are these chipmunks. I don't know if you have chipmunks in Alaska, but they're vicious. They're vicious and they're cruel because they don't just eat the tomatoes. They take one bite and suck the juice out because they're dehydrated, they're thirsty, and then they just go to the next one and they just keep doing it. So you wake up in the morning, it's a beautiful day. You see, oh my God, look at that tomato. That tomato looks perfect. And you pick it up and it's empty. There's nothing in it. It is so frustrating. It is pushing my animal, kindness to the limit here.
Oh, what's hilarious is I adopted my chipmunks. I'm just kidding. I'm talking about my dogs. They are pains in my garden. I have
Really?
one small dog though, and she's really the worst one. So in the spring, I grew everything in my garden from seed this year. I'm sure you probably grew a lot from seed as well. Yeah. And
90%. Yeah.
Yeah. And most of that is because it's really hard to get organic seedlings. So I wanted to grow I wanted my crop to be organic. So I started a lot from seed this year, everything from seed this year. And when everything was little seedlings, it's smaller in the garden bed, like early on in the season, she would see a squirrel running inside of our fence. And so she would just be running back and forth, just
oh no,
everything that I have. You don't know what it took for me to get my quinoa to like 24 inches. She knocked them over so many times, and I was growing rainbow quinoa. It was my first time ever growing quinoa. I didn't even think about growing quinoa before, and so I thought it was so
really cool.
And after I finally get it to 24 inches tall, after her like destroying so many of them, then I got a windstorm that came through and blew them all down. I was just like, what in the world? But yeah, there's things beyond your control, even pets or whatever. Having a pet-friendly garden is a struggle in and of itself.
It really is. And you bring up a good point there because there's so many factors that just, for the home grower that makes you appreciate the work of farmers.
Yes.
And I want to get to the point where, when you see that tomato that someone's eating, you're like, man, where'd you get that tomato? You can say, hey, from this farm. Like, I want people to know their farmer. Much like if I ask you, hey, where'd you get those shoes? And you said, oh, they're Gucci, right? Like, I want people to feel that good about their vegetables, right? And it is hard because we are so disconnected from our food system, and we show up to these just buildings where the food magically appears, and then we take it home, and we don't really have that same connection to farmers. And one of the reasons I also moved out here to LA is I'm working with a really cool company called Crop Swap, which you would love, by the way. It's an early stage startup that's focusing on democratizing the farmers market experience. So much like you go on Uber and find a car, or WAG to go find a dog walker, you go on the app and you find a farmer. And this is a box that you're going to get sent to your house or picked up at a location, and you know exactly what's in that box. And it's different than a lot of other sort of CSA shares or food delivery programs, because the food is usually stays in a warehouse for a certain amount of time and then is shipped out by a third party. All this produce is within 24 hours picked. It's at your door.
Wow.
And then secondly, like it's such a variety, and you know exactly what's going to be in that box instead of opening it up and being like, great, 12 rutabaga. Awesome. Like it can be tough. So that's a really exciting company that, I'm excited to start making some videos going to their farms and, sort of promoting this more regenerative and local farming movement here.
I love that. Your essential farmers, who's getting what you're producing?
So for the Essential Farmers Project specifically, we bring those to public fridges. So there's a group called the Friendly Fridge where you would bring, if we had 200 pounds of tomatoes, We'd find friendly fridges in Brooklyn, Staten Island, wherever, and we put those there for anyone who needs them to take it.
Okay. And then this organization, what's the name of them again?
Crop Swap.
Crop Swap. They are working with farmers to get you this very fresh box of getting variety. And that's what a lot of people, I think we all get excited, especially in spring when we've got this spring, this cabin fever. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so excited to see things grow and whatnot. And we're so excited to grow this garden. We don't realize how long it takes for things to get to the point where they're producing, then to actually, like we were saying, get it away from animals and the elements and all these other things to a point where you actually get to harvest. And it could take so many months to get to that spot. And then you can be harvesting just a bunch of tomatoes, or I'm harvesting tons of carrots right now. It's like you get a lot of, now they're the most delicious carrots ever, but you get a lot of, the same kind of thing at one time. You have to be very progressive with your planting, and there's a lot of things. So that would be such a great thing to be able to support people that are doing their thing and get this awesome variety pack of fresh produce. That's incredible.
And variety and that diversity is better for the soil.
Yes.
Because you're not monocropping, you're doing crop rotations, you're trying different things, you're planting companion plants together. And it's something that in our more industrialized food system, we don't really have. And unless you're one of these local farms that maybe has access to the Whole Foods or the top farmers markets, maybe you're doing better. But a lot of them that rely on restaurants have struggled. If they've lost hotel contracts because people aren't traveling right now, they're looking for other ways to support themselves. And what better way than to connect directly with the consumer for the first time?
That's huge. So another thing I'm really interested about in your recent journey was your experience transitioning to TV for the large flower fight. The big flower fight.
Oh boy. I'm a competitive guy, right? I was the athlete and everything in the former life, right? So I love the competition, but this was definitely the hardest, most stressful thing I have ever done by a long shot, because we're competing against folks who are professional florists and really do this for a living. And, it's not often that a client in New York says, you know what, Nick, instead of that Monstera there, how about a 20-foot beetle? I think that would look great. So it's
made out
tough.
of cut flowers, something that's not even a specialty.
Out of cut flowers, this and honestly, no offense to any florists out there. If you're a florist listening, please close your ears. But they're morticians. They don't have to worry about keeping those plants alive, and it's fun. I prefer things that are still alive and living. But it's it was a great challenge. I had so much fun with my partner Taylor. She's fantastic, such a beautiful artist, and it was a lot of fun meeting the other competitors as well.
And it looks like you made some really awesome lasting friendships from that experience.
Oh, totally. I still keep in touch with everyone from the show. I was FaceTiming with Jim and Ralph, Dad and Lad, the other day. Sarah, one of the other Americans, she's a close friend now, and I've gone to her floral workshops in DC. So it's really became a beautiful little family there.
And how was traveling over there? How was that, the experience of being there?
It was amazing. I've done a lot of European travel in the past, but this one was a work trip, right? You're there, you are working hard, 12 to 16-hour days, depending on, what's going on in the competition. So we had a really good time, and it also allowed you to explore and do different things. After I was eliminated, I solo traveled through northern Italy and actually worked on a farm, an organic farm in Verona. And it was just epic. My host family was incredible. I learned so much. I picked tomatoes at 6 a.m. with, immigrants from Bulgaria and Kazakhstan. It was such a humbling experience and something I would not have had without the show.
That's so awesome. I love seeing the plant community come together in new ways and come up with different things. And, when I was watching the big flower fight and knowing your position in the plant industry, you know, being a plant guy and seeing how much they were doing with cut flowers. Now, I've been a florist as well for years, and I know that that is a brutal industry. It is so difficult to keep plants thriving once they've been cut off from their root system. So keeping flowers fresh, greenery fresh, all that kind of stuff. And it's taking hours for you guys to just create these things. So it's like just the amount of time it's taking for you to put everything in place. These plants are deteriorating so fast. So, I mean, you guys just did incredibly beautiful work. And I was so impressed by everything that you guys did, especially being people who normally work with plants with roots, because it is a whole different world working with cut flowers.
Yeah. And watching some of the more floral focused competitors do some of the challenges with living plants was horrifying, because I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing to that plant? Oh, stop. I can't watch.
Yeah, because they're used to being able to just manhandle anything. I mean, when you're a florist,
exactly,
you spend 90% of your time ripping plants apart. You get a stem, and that stem has tons of leaves, and the only thing really valuable to you is the flower at the end. So you spend 90% of your day just ripping the leaves off, and at the end of the day, you're standing in about a 4-foot pile deep of leaves. And that's just a regular florist business. That's not a competition or anything like that. So yeah, it's
our workstations
brutal.
were quite messy at the end of it.
Oh, that's so funny. So tell us what's coming up for your future, Nick. What lies ahead?
I can't reveal too much. Some of the projects I'm working on are top secret at the moment. But hopefully we'll be able to watch them soon.
Gives us something to look forward to.
Something to look forward to. But yeah, I think the big focus out here in LA is going to be less so with clients and more so with some educational content. Being able to showcase like, hey, this is a space that I have that has unlimited plant potential. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to assess the space here inside. We're going to activate different spaces on my rooftop and grow food. We're going to do some hydroponics. We're going to try and create, a microgreen operation in the garage. Like, there's a lot of cool plant projects that I'm going to try and tackle. And, the client work is great, and I'm sure I'll take that as it comes. But, there's something more rewarding for me about helping the masses versus helping the one person who has got a $30 million apartment and doesn't really care about the plants to begin with, right? I want to get that message out there to as many people as possible and just make plants fun for them, right? As much as it's about knowledge, it's just as much about confidence and being able to feel like you are enjoying this process, because the moment it doesn't become fun is the moment you got to stop. So I've got a bunch of fun projects lined up and excited to really turn my new space into something special.
That's awesome. It's great to remember that it is all just a journey. There is no destination. If there's an end to us getting our last plant or whatever it is, then that kind of takes the joy out of what's next. It's about growing. This whole life experience is about continuing to grow. And so knowing that you have a lot ahead of you and you kind of have a fresh, clean slate to start on right now, that's so exciting. What advice would you give to, somebody out there who's maybe a plant person that's also interested in maybe being a little bit more sustainable and making some movements towards that type of lifestyle?
I think about this a lot. The houseplant world could use a little bit of a boost in that department, I think. Number one, I think it starts with what you said earlier, that honest self-assessment of, can I take care of this plant? Because if that plant dies, it is effectively going to be wasted. And I hope you're thinking about composting it, but most people probably don't. So just being very mindful and selective and purposeful with the plants you choose to bring into your space. The second thing is save those nursery pots. Seriously, like, I use them for everything. If I'm giving a gift to someone and starting a cutting or a seed or whatever it is, they're useful. So don't just get rid of them. And sometimes your plant shops will take them back. So don't be afraid to be like, hey, I just bought this plant. When I repot this, can I give this back to you? Some of them say yes.
Not to interrupt you, but even our botanical garden here locally and many of the nurseries and garden centers, if you just call up to them, they will take, because that helps save them. It costs them to buy new pots. If they can reuse stuff, they are happy to do that. So definitely contact local people or just keep them because they are so useful.
So aside from just saving your plastic pots or bringing them to some of the plant shops, there's a company out there that I haven't used yet because once when I was about to start, the pandemic hit, but it's called Precious Plastic. And they have these different machines and sites throughout the country where you can bring plastic that gets like heated up and like molded down into other shapes. So you could make a planter out of your nursery planters, which would be very meta. You could make other types of, different gadgets and things like that out of it. You could do those little, bowls or what are they called when you put the glass on something on wood, and it's a little
like a coaster
things that a coaster. Yeah, I guess I'm not an adult yet that I have a full need for coasters. Yes. But yes, so it's a really cool way of making use of that plastic.
Especially if you're a brand or something, that'd be fun to make some cool stuff out of.
I plan on finding a facility here, hopefully if it's, safe to do so. But I was very intent on doing that because you collect a lot, especially when you're doing landscaping projects. You're getting 100 plants at a time. So it could be a lot.
It totally can add up. And sometimes, you have damaged ones that break or whatever and become less useful over wear and stuff too. And so it's great to have alternate purposes because, contrary to popular belief, 90% of what goes to recycling facilities never gets recycled. So recycling, if we notice the term reduce, reuse, recycle is the last option. Recycling is the last thing you want to do. What you first want to do is reduce and reuse as much as you can. And then if you have something at the end of it, recycle it, instead of sending it to trash. But there's lots of things, and you can even sometimes just post them on Facebook Marketplace for free. And there's other people out there that are looking for them or whatever that need that. So yeah, being very mindful of the way that we can repurpose some of our garden stuff. And recently I heard someone even talking about being mindful about the way that we repurpose our soil. Because a lot of our soil from houseplants and stuff comes with a lot of chemicals and things like that in it. And just taking outside and dumping it in the forest or in your backyard or whatever, if you have extra soil, is really not the best thing to do with it. Maybe having a separate compost or, there's other ways of considering what to do with some of that leftovers as well, after you're done with that stuff.
No, totally agree. Question for
you. Yeah, of course.
So you studied this, right? You are, I would say much more of a plant expert than I, given that this is your world. This is your field of study. I came into this much later than you and don't have the formal education. What advice would you have for someone in my position to keep educating myself and, build that plant knowledge? I know we talked about trial and error, but what are some other things that you would recommend for me?
Oh, I love this question. Thank you for asking. Really, I think that the best thing that anyone can do is experiment with new things. And that does kind of run a similar line with, trial and error with getting your hands dirty. But what I've discovered through creating this podcast even is that there are millions of ways that plants touch our lives. So many millions of ways. In fact, right now I'm working on creating a video that gives you the perspective of if you woke up a day in the life and you had nothing around you that was made from plants, what would our life look like? If we stripped away all the things that are made by plants, what will we have left in our life and in our home environment and everywhere? And so when you start breaking down the fact that plants are everywhere, you can start realizing that there's all these different ways to experiment with them. Like you're saying, you're working on growing microgreens, working on things that give you gratification in different ways, growing your own food, growing things from seed. But just, I think even taking it deeper to other cultures and bringing in a lot of their knowledge, because there's so many now that we're really like opening up to other cultures and what they have to offer. There are so many practices that we have today that came from a lot of those cultures. And so diving into that, we can find a lot more practices that we didn't know about or we haven't been utilizing. And there's just so much you can do in this industry. The more it grows, the more limitless it becomes. And I just feel like it's great to continue to pursue your joy, whatever's sparking creativity for you. You don't need to stay on the same path. Like we're saying, it's a journey. So maybe, now you're doing this thing, but in a few years from now, you might be doing something else. I was doing a lot more interior commercial businesses, and then I did landscaping, and then I was volunteering all the time with the Master Gardeners, and then I started moving into houseplants, or actually before houseplants, I really was moving into art. Let whatever inspires you inspire this path like as well, and just keep pursuing that joy, because whatever is bringing you joy right now is that aligned path.
I love that advice. I recommend that to people who are just starting to get into the plant world. Like try a bunch of different things. And for me now, like I've reached that point where I'm like, oh man, I've done a lot of things, but like there's still a couple things that are just daunting out there, right? Like, the idea of creating like a vivarium is very big for me now. Like, because I want to have frogs and lizards. Like that's a whole other sphere of knowledge. And, I'm going to try. I'm going to go for it. I've got, the time and the excitement to just kind of take on these new projects. But I will certainly be coming your way for some advice.
Yeah, and it's interesting because things that might not be interesting for you now, like, maybe right now you're not somebody who's interested in growing food, but somewhere down the line that may interest you. I was never interested in terrariums or growing anything like that, but after following the Botany Geek for a while on Instagram.
How cool is the best?
He makes these little micro jungles that I'm just like, I need that in my life. You let other people inspire you. And when you get that spark of joy, okay, this is the time for me to get into terrariums. Years ago, if I would have done it, I probably would have just killed it. But now that I'm interested and I'm really passionate about it, this would be a great time for me to explore that. And all I can say is that plants are so much more highly evolved than us. And we know this on a genome level. They're so much more evolved, and they've been here for so much longer that there will never be an end to what we can learn about them. There will never be an end to the plant journey where it's like, okay, I've learned all I can about plants and I know it all. And now it's time to move on. Nobody knows it all. We can never, because we aren't advanced enough to possibly understand what they are. And I just recently learned that when we're walking in the woods, even trees are giving off all these different chemicals. There's tons that are actually producing all these reactions.
Volatile organic compounds.
Yes. And it's like they are having an influence. They're like using their magic on us all the time, and we don't even realize it. So there's so much to know. It can go forever.
I love that. And I think it's humbling, right? To know that you don't know it all. And, you'll love this story. I was up in Ithaca, New York, which is a beautiful farmland area, really great growers up there. And I was with my girlfriend and we were visiting a mushroom farm because this is what we do for fun when we travel. We just visit the local farms. And the guy there was growing shiitakes on logs. And the process for doing this is just so careful and thought out. And they like submerge the logs that are inoculated in cold water in the brook, and they bring them out, and then the mushrooms grow. And he goes, this is typically the process, but also we typically get good harvests when there's lightning storms. I was like, well, what do you mean? He goes, anytime there's a lightning storm, the mushrooms take off and grow faster than ever before. I don't know why. It's just known.
What?
And I'm sitting there, it's like how mystical is that? Like,
wow.
You're waiting for the lightning, and somehow something in the lightning affects the mushrooms grow. Like, that is insane to me.
Yes, it's so powerful. I think that has been one of my biggest lessons from this Music of the Plants device that I've been experimenting with. And what's so interesting is that what it's reading is energetics. And so I can walk into the room and my energy, I can hear the influence in the music. Everything makes a difference. If a really loud airplane flies overhead, I mean, it's intense energy. We live in Alaska. There's planes everywhere. And so if the really loud one flies overhead, the energy is intense. You can feel it. And the plants will stop playing music. They have all these different energetic interactions. And when you get to see that or hear that happening, you realize that we are connected on such a deeper level, an invisible level that we cannot see, we cannot sense, but there is so much that interaction happening even when we don't realize it, even in those small, subtle ways.
Yeah, there's just so much we will never know. And I consider myself just, hey, I'm a passive observer.
Yep.
Like, you're going to do you, and I'm just going to be here, and I'm going to enjoy what you're doing, and I'm going to try and support it as best I can. But I am not in control here.
No, And I try to say a lot that I'm speaking not on behalf of the plants, because really even speaking for them is an entitled, response. They definitely don't need anybody to speak on their behalf. They do all their work for themselves, but just trying to speak the wisdoms that they've taught me and, that have influenced my life. I always say the more I'm living and trying to be like a plant, the better I feel like I'm living as a human.
You and I are remarkably similar. I always joke about trying to become 100% plant as much as I can be. So you got to come hang in LA, totally. Or I got to go up to Alaska. It seems like it's a must.
I have some family in LA, and it would be awesome to have you up here in Alaska. It's an incredible spot. But yes, I'm always saying that when I moved to Alaska, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to photosynthesize up there. This is kind of crucial business. Need a required amount of light to survive. So where can we continue to follow your journey and stay connected with you, Nick?
Yeah, it's just Farmer Nick NYC on Instagram. I will not change it to LA just because I know where my roots are. So yes. I'm keeping it there. I've got my website, which is the same as the handle, and then I've got my my newsletter where I'm talking about things related to the houseplant world, gardening, sustainability, and food, trying to tie it all together and make it as actionable as possible to start living that best plant-based life that you can. So that's where to find me. And then hopefully more fun plant adventures to come.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing all that you have ahead. It's very exciting. And I'm glad to see that even during these crazy times that we live in, that there's lots of opportunity ahead for you and for essential farmers and for all the awesome things that you are doing for people and for the planet. Thank you just so much for your heart and for caring about these things. Everything you're doing is really incredible. I'm a really big fan.
No, thank you. And know the same goes back to you. And if there's anything I can do to support, we plant people got to stick together.
Yes.
So don't hesitate to ask.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for all the wisdom and insightfulness you gave us today. This has been a conversation I've really been looking forward to because I love when I'm able to drill the point home of plants, bringing us back to the planet. Thank you so much for your time today, and it's been wonderful talking to you.
Thank you.
Talking with others who are environmentalists disguised as plant people has left me absolutely inspired. I've said this before, but it deserves repeating. We are capable of living in harmony with the planet without compromising all the beautiful things that we love. We just have to come together and get innovative. As for your challenge this week, I challenge you to share one of your favorite sustainable brands with us in your Instagram stories and tag Among the Jungle to be featured. Be sure to keep up with us on Instagram, where I drop lives, challenges, IGTVs, and guest interviews, as well as TikTok at Among the Jungle for 15-second videos on plants, planet, and positivity. Also, follow Farmer Nick on Instagram and sign up for his newsletter, which can be found in the show notes at amongthejungle.com/020. And lastly, if you love this episode, be sure to share this podcast with your favorite plant friends. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I hope you're inspired by our combined passion for not only plants, but the planet as a whole. We are so connected. Therefore, the more we learn about plants, the more we learn about us and our planet. This is true with everything. Follow your passion and your curiosity, and it will take you to only the most magical of places. Until next week, Jungle Dwellers, love, light, and aloha. I am so grateful to the plants that bless this beautiful earth, and to you for choosing to nurture a wild place inside of your heart. I hope this episode inspired your wild, and I'd love to hear your feedback, suggestions for future guests, and other botanical notes at amongthejungle.com or Among the Jungle on Instagram. It's been lovely exploring this exotic world with you today, and I look forward to where the journey takes us next week. Mahalo for tuning in, and stay wild.